Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Green Dragon Podcast. I'm your host, Aiden.
Fellow host Tom.
And your fellow host Jake.
Well, guys, another week, and another week we have to be grateful to be alive and well, and we're not under attack by anybody, and the world hasn't fallen apart quite yet. I'm not sure I have too much faith in it, especially after our podcast last week. I feel like I left that podcast and I actually finished the Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Rogan podcast. And I finished listening to that, and I got like really depressed there for like a day, and I was like, I think we're just gonna get nuked tomorrow. That was like my mindset for like a day and a half. I was like, nothing really matters anymore. I was like, I might as well just live my life. It's gonna be the nuclear apocalypse no matter what. I don't know if you guys were in the same boat, but I was like, that conversation really got me down. And then I realized after like 2 days that it probably wasn't gonna happen within the next week, so I should probably get my shit together and not lay around on the couch and slack off at my job and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it this week. I was like, oh wow, I do have a lot to be thankful for because it could be a lot worse. Because I started to think about it. I was like, where would I be at right now if there was a nuclear apocalypse? And not that this is anything to laugh at, but you know, I it does make you realize how lucky you are that the world hasn't been blown to bits yet. So I'm happy to be here again this week. And this week, we're gonna wrap up our last two amendments, so the 9th and 10th Amendment. So we'll wrap up the final two articles of the Bill of Rights. So that's pretty exciting. I feel like after this, we might be we've got a lot of topics we want to talk about. I think picking which direction we're going to be headed in next is going to be the challenging part, and deciding where we're going to focus our next few podcasts and all our research and our time. I think that's going to be a bit challenging, but I am excited for it because we do have a lot we want to talk about. So, with that all being said, um, let's jump right in. We'll start out with some domestic news this week. I don't know how much you guys read up on this, but President Biden took a visit to the great state of California. And while he was there, he decided to uh, participate in his favorite pastime, which seems to be what every old person loves to do. And that is going to the ice cream shop, getting himself a cone. He eats it like a maniac. And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but anybody that bites ice cream instead of
What? Oh.
like bites it. Yeah, like how like some people, and I think anybody that bites like takes a bite out of their ice cream, I think they're a serial killer. Like legitimately, I think if you bite your ice cream in order to eat it, I think you're a serial killer. The only proper way to eat ice cream is either with a spoon or like I don't know, you take a lick of ice cream. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Biting it. I mean, it's not really a food you bite. So it's like that'd be like it's like the people that like bite their fork when they eat, like they really
Yeah.
chomp down on it. Those people are psychopaths too. So if that's telling, I think it 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 really just made me cringe a little bit when I saw him doing that. But what made me cringe even more is when he was questioned about how the economy was doing. He said, "The economy, quote, the economy is strong as hell." And I don't know about you, you guys, but I, why he said that, that made me cringe even more. I was like, Trump could have gotten away with that, but Biden, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something that should be coming out of uh, a guy with dementia that's like 92 years old.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
what was funny to me about it was how prompt he was with the answer.
oh
Like he
yeah,
didn't miss a beat
no,
on
he's like,
on the
the economy is
question.
strong as hell. It was funny. I got a kick out of it.
I give him I give him points for confidence. but that's about it.
Yeah, they're like, "Hey Joe, they're gonna ask you how the economy is doing, and you really gotta sell this one, bud. Yeah, I mean, like you gotta pull out all the bells and whistles. You really gotta put everything you got into this. You know how many Adderalls were spent on that answer right there? They pumped him so full of Adderall before he gave that answer. He was like, his eyes were bugging out. He was so hyper focused, and he just had that one line in his head. He's like, economy is. He was repeating it for the 2 hours prior. He was actually sitting there mumbling to himself for 2 hours prior. He couldn't say anything else. He was like, the economy is strong as hell. The economy is strong as hell. The economy. The economy. He was practicing it in the mirror too, I bet. So, yeah, yeah, yeah. He was he. You know what? Like you said, Jake, I'll give him credit. He really gave it everything he had. He probably had to take a nice long nap after that one. Um, but yeah, so yeah, that was a thing, which is hilarious because the real Daily Wire pointed out, as he's eating his ice cream, he's saying the economy is strong as hell, and Daily Wire pointed out that this statement is ironic because ice cream prices since he's been president have actually increased 13.6% in cost. So if that tells you anywhere where our economy is, if the ice cream prices are almost 15% increase as of what? How long's he been president now? It feels like a millennium. Uh, almost 2 years. I mean, yeah, it's it's kind of crazy. So I thought that was pretty funny. Um, moving on. Speaking of presidents, former president Trump has been officially subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. Don't know if you guys saw that. He'll have to testify under oath. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of news to come on that. I believe it was a unanimous decision by the committee. Not that that says much because I'm sure they're all biased. I mean, everybody in Washington seems to be if they're on a committee. So yeah, we'll see what ends up going on there. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. That just was something that popped up on my radar that I was like, well, it makes me chuckle a little bit because you know I feel like the Democratic Party's been trying to pin Trump down for years now since he was elected president in 2016. Um, they've been after him. So whether or not they'll get him on this one, I don't have high. I mean, listen, if you're a liberal out there that doesn't like Trump, don't have any high hopes because the track record isn't very good at this point. So we'll see.
Yeah, it strikes me as just a last ditch effort to impede his path to the presidency, or at least running for president as
Mm-hmm.
much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They've tried two impeachments; those didn't work. Um, the Russia collusion hoax, of course, and they'll never. They're they're pretty inexhaustible. They have an inexhaustible source of accusations they can bring up against him. So they won't stop until either he wins again or fades from the spotlight.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You said inexhaustible, and the first thing that came to my mind is their ability to have this seemingly endless ability to waste time that they should be spending on real problems, uh, and their ability to waste money too, and our money. So yeah, the joys of dealing with corrupt politicians that think it's their pet project to lock each other up.
Yeah, I
It's
mean when you think about it, there's really three issues that they're running off of these midterms and going into the 2024 election. It's Trump, climate change, and abortion. If you
mhm.
look at any of their talking points, listen to AOC, Schumer, Pelosi. That's the only three issues they'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean, here in Georgia, we've got for the governor race, we've got Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp being the incumbent, he's a Republican. Stacey Abrams, I think it's kind of hilarious. I think they did a poll on Georgia voters to see what the most important issue was, and guess what? Georgia voters said the economy. Well, guess what? Stacey Abrams' primary talking point is for the last like 6 months: abortion. And it's like, okay, abortion, it may affect that issue if you're somebody that supports it, it may affect maybe, and this is being very generous, 25% of the population, while our economy affects everybody. So what are the real issues we should be focusing on here? And so these hot topics like abortion, like Trump, they're just smoke and mirrors to distract from the fact that these people don't actually have any clue about how to run our country. None of them are. Most of them are not qualified, and so it's just a distraction from that because most of them are extremely incompetent.
Yeah, it seems like a lot more has been being shown in how uncooperative the Democrats are to speak with Republicans or be interviewed. Um, I don't know if you've heard of the lady Katie Hobbs from Arizona, who's
I think I've heard the name. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nominee. Well, she is refusing to speak with the Republican nominee. Oh, I think her name's Carrie Lake, Corey Lake, something. Um, but she said that she didn't want to be quote like derided in public, and everyone was like, "What? Like you're just talking to somebody?" And then Project Veritas actually was trying to get an interview with her, and they like came up with a microphone and was like, "Hey, can you answer some questions?" And she like ran away from them. Like she didn't even want to talk to them
Oh,
anymore.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
saw that. Yeah. So it's interesting because it seems like the Democrats are just yelling at everybody else, but not willing to talk with anyone. It's strange.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If you're a politician, you should expect to be in the spotlight. And not only should you expect to be in the spotlight, but people expect you, if you have an opinion or position on something, people expect you to be able to explain and voice your reasoning for that opinion or stance, especially as a politician, just because you're supposedly the person that's going to be representing the people. So if you can't get up and coherently argue for a certain position, you shouldn't be up there. Period. I mean, it's just silly, and it's interesting how I feel like this new wave of politicians, I mean, it's mostly because they're in it for themselves, right? But none of them can get up and actually form a coherent argument. They get up there and they spit their like 5 minutes of nonsense that they've kind of memorized, their little elevator pitch, so to speak, and then if anybody asks them any sort of question that's off the things they've prepared for, or it deviates in any way, they can't answer it because they don't actually have opinions. They're just regurgitating what they've been told to say up there.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a sad way to see them even try to present themselves because, like, the idea of politics, generally speaking, is supposed to be discussion of ideas, um, brought to you by the public. So if you aren't listening to the public in any way, really, but just to what you want to hear, then essentially you're the antithesis of what your position is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting to look at how politics has shifted over time. But I mean, yeah, like it's on. Unfortunately, it's on both sides. I even see it a little bit too, in a lot of these Senate races or these races for the House of Representatives, even on the Republican side. Um, you get people that get up there and you just kind of wonder. You listen to them in a debate, and you're like, they can't really stand up there and defend any of the things they're saying. They're just saying these things as like fact. It's like, okay, well, that's that's good and all. You have an opinion. I mean, hopefully it's your opinion, but you need to be able to defend it. I mean, if you truly believe in it, then you should be able to easily defend it, right? And I was watching which debate was it? It was the Georgia Senate race for it was between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, and neither impressed me at all. And Herschel Walker's uh, the primary. He won the primaries here, so he got up there for the Republicans, and he got up there. I agreed with most of the things he said, but you can just always tell when somebody's up there and kind of a puppet, and just saying things, and when they actually, you can tell they're behind what they're saying. I just felt like it was just kind of lackluster. You get people that are up there and lackluster, and it's hard to get behind somebody that's lackluster as a voter. Why vote for somebody that's not passionate about what they're saying and seems like they truly mean and believe what they're saying? And I think that's where the like lack of trust from the public is becoming more and more of an issue, because you have a lot of these people that are up there that either don't really care or just aren't spending the time they should be to be really really educated on the positions and the stances that they're taking.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big reason why Trump gained so much traction in the primaries back in 2016 was that his talking points were so unscripted and genuine that people found it easier to get behind than your average politician that comes up with their list of talking points that you'll hear every other every other one of the same party and viewpoints speaking. um but yeah, there's, again, outside of Trump and maybe DeSantis, a few others, there's not a lot that I can think of that really um that yeah would really impress me on a debate setting.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this today, guys. I think it might be helpful even for us to for our own education, just to, and we could even do a podcast on this, a future podcast. With the elections coming up, it might be worth just going over some of the states that are the most contentious as far as swing states, and then also who are candidates out there that really represent um, American values and who are truly genuine. Because I think there's a lot of phonies out there. I think there's a lot of people that are just in it for themselves, as far as politicians go. So I mean, I know for me at least, it's always nice when I read up on somebody in politics that's actually genuine. So that was something I was thinking about, just because we're going into election season, and I think a lot of people are looking for really genuine people to represent them, whether it's in the House, whether it's in the Senate, um, or even local government as well, or even just being able to give resources. I don't know if too many resources. I don't know if you guys do, but maybe that's something we could think about for a future podcast, because I think I think there's a lot of people that could really benefit from that.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's up yet, but a family friend of mine, she is we're running for city council in Springfield, Illinois, and she's
Oh, really?
also working on a website where you can find out all the information on all the policies and views by each candidate in your respective region. Which is a pretty great idea because that's something I think because I personally have been kind of frustrated by like when you get a politician's pamphlet in the mail and you go to their website, they don't really tell you what they're interested in doing. It's mostly just like their name, where they're from, and then a donate now button. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's
Where?
like
Give me the money.
awful.
Show me the
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that too, and I think what's interesting is like even if I look at a lot of Republican candidates, I look at a lot of the things they're running on, and I don't agree with a lot of it. Or and sometimes I'll find it a Democratic candidate that actually has more that I agree with than the Republican candidate. So it's interesting to actually see what the person is running on, because then I think then you can make a more educated decision on, is this really somebody I can support? And it's not just, okay, they're Democrat or they're Republican and I should vote for them because of that when you go to the polling booth, but it's actually because this is somebody that I support the things that they support, or I want to support the things that they support, or they represent what I want to support. And I think that's important. And I think that's something that's kind of been lost in our, at least in the recent years of voting. It's just kind of you pick your party and you go into the voting booth and you just vote all. You really don't know who you're voting for. You're just voting for the party. And I think at the very least, you should do a little bit of research to really understand who you're voting for and what they represent.
yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting if there was a really good way to find out about people's positions and then their history at least, then you can make a more educated decision because a lot of times it's like the only thing you can really go off of is a family referral. Like you ask your dad or someone you know, like who is it that's the best?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's usually people who spend a lot of time trying to find out. So there's not much transparency there, which then makes you a little worried because then you don't feel like you're in the know of what's actually going on and who's trying to do what.
yeah. No, I just had a great idea, and if anybody listens to this and steals this idea, I had it first. But do you guys remember that that website we you guys may have used this in college called Rate My Professor? We need one of those for politicians. We'll call it Rate My Politician or Rate My Politician, and we'll put up, people can put up their if it's somebody that's an incumbent, they can put up their review of them, or you just get people's 2 cents on them, and you might get some really bad reviews, but you might get some helpful reviews. You might get that person that's just really stupid, like in college, and they're like, "Well, they gave me an F, and I hate this professor," and like everybody else is like, "Great professor." You'll get those people that talk about the politicians, but then you'll get the ones that are like actually give the good rundown, and I think this is something that could take off.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
I mean, why not leave it up to the people to decide, right? Who's good and who's bad? And it's even better because then it's not just, well, I mean, I guess you don't know for 100% fact, but then it's not just some website curated by one person. It's a it's a bunch of different people getting on and giving their 2 cents on people. Uh, and that's really at the end of the day probably more valuable.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea. It's supposed to be autonomy um, within the person to decide what they think would be the best way to further what's important to them. So
Exactly. Yeah.
when when the top-down approach starts to hinder, and right now we're seeing directly contradict what's the best interest for the people, that's all the definition of a tyranny. Because tyranny is a self-centered government at the people's expense. So it's almost like people are, at least a lot of politicians, from what I've seen, um, they almost want to be voted into a place where they have some sort of security, and then they can kind of do whatever, and then they can leave. It's not like a statesman who is present for the people in order to serve their best interests in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it right there. I think that's exactly it.
Yeah, I think that's especially true with local elections, which can often tend to get overlooked, which then makes it easier for the politicians to overstep their boundaries if the people aren't paying attention. They have a little more leeway when they're not in the national spotlight, such as Biden or um, any other president, senator. Not that there's no overreach on their part ever, but when you're flying under the radar, you can yeah, it's a little easier to take advantage and have a little kind of mini tyranny.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, just thinking about at home, Winfield, Illinois, how much corruption there was just in the trustees board.
Exactly.
Like, how could there be
Yeah.
this much stuff going on? This little trustees board that doesn't do hardly anything.
Yeah. Well, I think it just goes to show you how incredibly dangerous giving people unchecked power is. Because, I think no matter who you are, you can be corrupted by your influence and your power. So if you give people this unchecked power, I mean, it really it goes to your head, and you think you know best, and before you know it, you're not making even people that get in it for the right reasons come out, and they kind of they start making decisions that don't represent what the people want and serve their best interest. And I think that's the problem with politics today is the system set up that politicians, by gaining more power, gain more money. And when there's money in things, I think it causes some real issues. I think people's morals fold very quickly.
Yeah, it's a lot of people have for sale signs on themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Um, you were saying, Aiden, that there's a couple new um, news headlines in Second Amendment news.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two that are kind of in the same vein, both involving the ATF, of course, because that agency seems to end up in every Second Amendment news headline. They sneak themselves into everything. The first one is regarding actually that pistol brace ban that we talked about. I think that was our first or second podcast. I can't remember if it was in our Second Amendment podcast or if we talked about it the week after. But regardless, It was a news kind of a news headlines slash rundown given by Guns and Gadgets on YouTube. He's a great YouTuber if you want more Second Amendment news and information. He's probably my favorite to watch on YouTube. That's where I get a lot of my information from. Just from current events, he's got a lot of ties in the community, so he's a really great YouTube channel. We'll link that below. But this one is regarding the pistol brace ruling that is going into effect. I believe he said December 28th of this year, so 2022. He gave a rundown basically on, he prefaced everything by saying, this ruling is completely unconstitutional. There's no reason that the ATF should be able to do this. It goes against everything in our constitutional rights. However, these are kind of the three options that the ATFs presented to you if you do own a firearm with a pistol brace. Number one would be to turn it in or destroy it, and I believe most gun owners would say, fuck you, give a little middle finger to the ATF and move on. So if you're not interested in that one, you can actually you can take your 16 or less inch barrel off, or sorry, anything less than six. If you've got a pistol, you're probably running like a 10.5 inch or shorter inch barrel on there, maybe a 12.5. So you can take that barrel and upper off the firearm, and you can actually put a 16-inch or longer barrel on the gun. If you do that, then it is okay. But at that point, you might as well just swap everything out and turn it into a full, AR-15. It kind of defeats the purpose. And then your third and final option is you can remove the pistol brace, which is just a stupid little piece of plastic anyways, with straps on it. You can remove that from the buffer tube. So you can actually run the gun with the buffer tube, but with no pistol brace, and you're totally fine. So out of these three options, if I were you, I would just say remove the piece of plastic. It goes on and off easily. I'm not giving you any advice here, but it comes on and off pretty easily. And as soon as you take that piece of plastic off, it's not a pistol anymore, according to the ATF. So take that how you want to take it. But those are your three options. Or, like I said, these regulations go against our constitutional rights. The ATF has shouldn't have any real say in what we can and can't do when it comes to this stuff, even though they like to think they do. So, yeah. There's your quick three options. So if you got a pistol break, if you've got a AR pistol, remember it's December 28th. They will do a grace period as well if you want to file your SBR, or not SBR, your pistol, your AR pistol as an SBR short barreled rifle. They're offering a grace period for that. Thank you, ATF. So then you get to pay the nice like $250 tax stamp on that. So that's like a late Christmas gift to the ATF. So if you're interested in supporting the government and that wonderful three-letter agency, then you can go ahead and do that. But I'll tell you what, I'm not doing that. So yeah, that's a little rundown on the ATF's pistol brace ban. The other one is regarding the ATF's ability to regulate frames and receivers on ARs and other similar weapons. So there was several months ago, there was a lot of talks about this. ATF came out and said they were going to ban and change kind of the definition of what a frame and a receiver was in an effort to ban what they were calling ghost guns at the time, which basically just means it's an unregistered firearm, which is it's always been completely legal to build your own firearm as long as you don't sell it. Um, so a lot of people don't know that. Even people that own guns, it's completely legal to build your own firearm as long as you don't sell it and you use it for personal use. So the ATF was trying to change that because obviously, even though they say they don't have a gun registry, it's illegal for them to have a gun registry. The only way for them to have a gun registry, which they do have, it's been proven, um, is through having all guns registered. And that's just a giant list so that when they decide they're going to come and take our guns away, they know where to find us. Um, but but enough of that. Anyways, there was a court in Texas that had a lawsuit. There was a lawsuit filed by a company that produced 80% lower receivers, which just means it's a lower receiver. For those of you who don't know, that's the part that connects to the upper receiver, which holds the barrel, and the lower receiver also holds all the components for the firing mechanism, and it's where the magazine is actually loaded into the gun. And so there was a company, I forget if it was 80% firearms or something like that. They filed a lawsuit and they said this is ridiculous. The ATF shouldn't be able to regulate this. And so a court in Texas, a judge in Texas, is actually ruling in their favor thus far. So we'll see how far that goes. That could be huge. That could give a little knock on the ATF and hopefully set some precedent for further decisions down the line. Um, if there's ever law, I'm sure there'll be lawsuits in the case of the pistol brace as well. So, any little win is always a good sign, especially when you see lower courts ruling in the favor of citizens, and then those decisions being used in higher courts of law. So, those are that was a good piece of news I saw this week. Um, I'll leave the link to the video that I learned about that from down below if you in case you're interested, because yeah, like I said, good news. There's not much of that these days. um, but yeah, that's what I had for the Second Amendment news, guys. You guys have anything to add, or you guys want to move on to our ever exciting world news?
I just want to say real quick, it is I don't know, it's almost, I want to say, impressive how creative the ATF can become uh, in their strategy to vilify gun owners and firearms in general. It's really there's no end to their the definitions they can make up, or um, new regulations they can implement to really make life miserable for Second Amendment supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in, and I think too what's funny is you hear a lot of these they come up with these new regulations, and a lot of times, like in the case of this pistol brace ban, I mean, how stupid were they to say you could just take off the pistol brace? They do something that I think they think's really smart, and then you leave the loophole that people just you pull off the brace and it's not a pistol anymore. I mean, I don't know. I think if they were they but they do make they do seem to have a knack for making it miserable for us, and they like to think they have a whole lot of say in these matters, but in reality they don't. And yeah, the ATF's a fun one. They're always seeming to be they always seem to be pushing the limit when it comes to gun rights, and they like these little tricky regulations that don't seem like they're a big deal, but when you start to add them up, they start to remove a lot of our liberties. And so while banning pistols might not seem like a big deal, or changing the um, the verbiage for what a upper and lower receiver is, you start to add these things up and you start to realize that then if you allow these regulations to be in place, then you're just setting the precedent for them to come in later and take away our rights even more. So, you give them an inch, they come in and you know take a mile. So it's you can't really budge when it comes to this stuff, and they always seem to be pushing the limits.
Yeah, they always do seem like they want to push limits more often than not.
Yeah, and never in a good way.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit of Second Amendment news, guys. I always like to try to keep you guys updated with that stuff because after going through after we finish up these 10, the 9th and 10th today, I think you realize how much you realize how important the Second Amendment is, and defending all the other amendments. And without the Second Amendment, we probably wouldn't be able to defend and uphold the other 9 amendments. So it puts it in perspective a little bit on how important the Second Amendment actually is, and it really is kind of a cornerstone in our rights as American citizens.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Let's if you're ready, let's move on to some world news. We've got some headlines here, some interesting ones, some crazy ones, some sad ones. The first one I think we can chat about. Actually, maybe we'll start with China, because I always like to talk about China, and I know if I talk about China enough, I'll end up on like a hit list. I think if we talk about China enough and it like airs on Spotify, I think they've got enough like eyes and ears out there that they'll like tag this podcast and hopefully come after me. Hopefully they're listening to this right now. Hopefully like Xi Jinping is like sitting on his like golden throne or whatever he's got over there, and he's just like shaking his head. And he's like, "Go get those silly little Americans." That's a dare if he's listening to this. Um, that's probably not a good thing to put on there. Anyways, China actually halted all gas sales, liquefied natural gas sales, I should say, in Europe. And this came in the wake of something interesting I saw today. I actually didn't hear about it at all in the news. I don't know if you guys heard about this in the news, but the Biden administration dealt a pretty big blow to China, and it was an attempt to strangle the Chinese AI industry, and this would prevent China from designing and manufacturing its own high end chips and importing American chips and intellectual property. And if you guys don't know, chips are important, and we're talking about, we're not talking about Lay's potato chips here. I don't think those have any sort of importance in Chinese AI technology. I mean, maybe they're really behind us, and they're using the sodium or something to keep their cars running over there. I don't know, but the chips are important, in anything from laptops, smartphones, cars, aircrafts, right? Anything that runs off tech. Um, and so these advanced chips, and these are the ones that we're currently sanctioning, would be needed for supercomputing, developing military weaponry, AI, like I said. And so I think this move is probably a good one. Whether or not the Biden administration actually came up with it, I have doubts on that. I have a feeling this probably came from one of our intelligence agencies, because we've been pretty lax in how we've handled our counterintelligence efforts with China, at least as of recently. I think we've talked about that in some prior podcasts, but I think this is a good thing because this hopefully will really lock down China's ability to steal information from us, um, as well as it will take out any sort of um, hopefully it will reduce the amount of business transactions that are going on between us and China and us and Chinese companies when it comes to these computer chips, because these things, I mean, it really seems like these things are the new gold, and hopefully it slows down China's advancements in technology. I think it said actually, I'm trying to find this in the article, uh, but I it said according to some estimates, here we go. According to some estimates, China's chip making abilities are still decades away from the capabilities of America or Taiwan. Chinese officials said that these new restrictions are aimed to sabotage China's development. So that's a bit of good news, and I'm all for sabotaging it, because right now it's not being used for the right things. So I mean it's pretty interesting, and I think it does make a little bit of sense why China's kind of retaliating with these natural gas halts in sales to Europe. I'm sure they aren't selling anything to us. Maybe they are. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But for sure in Europe, they're halting all liquefied natural gas sales. So that was very interesting. And this comes right off the tail end of Chinese President Xi Jinping's address to uh, the people, I guess, after he's been appointed to serve his third term. He's actually the first Chinese president to serve a third term. It's basically, from what I've heard from uh, podcasts like Joe Rogan had Mike Baker on, and he said if Xi Jinping starts his third term, it will solidify him as essentially a dictator. So that's kind of big news that he's officially going to be serving his third term. In his address, he directed his focus on Taiwan and the external forces, as he called them, trying to influence Taiwan and Taiwanese freedom. He said that China wants a peaceful, quote, peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but he did say that they reserve the rights to reserve force. So I think he pretty much states what he wants there. I think that's pretty clear. They're gonna be going for Taiwan. It's just a matter of time. I saw something that a U.S. Intelligence officer commented saying that the timeline of a Chinese invasion on Taiwan has escalated greatly. So we'll probably see that coming. It will be very interesting to see how the U.S. handles that, as well as other countries. If it will be similar to the Russian invasion on Ukraine, or if people kind of take a back seat to it, enforce more sanctions. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. That could have some pretty big global implications. Um, and then the last thing with China, recently the U.S. has announced they will be releasing its relationship with the Saudi government. In the wake of that, last week China and Saudi Arabia held high-level talks, as they were called, about economic cooperation. So that was just 2 days after the U.S. announced they'd be cutting ties with the Saudi government. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes there. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if we'd see the Saudis adopting the Chinese yen as the main currency, instead of the U.S. dollar. I think that's extremely probable, and it's right in China's plan. They want to dominate the world economically. So how better to do that than get in bed with the Saudis and strike up some good oil and gas deals and boost the value of their currency at the same time. So something to keep our eyes on there. Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have anything to add to those? That's just kind of my quick weekly Chinese rundown.
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing, that developing alliance between China and Saudi Arabia, and you throw Russia in the mix, India, Brazil. I mean, that's a force to be reckoned with, without question.
Yeah, there's a lot of money there and a lot of natural resources and yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. You're seeing the tables kind of turning as far as where the power is, and a lot of power today has to do with natural resources, especially when it comes to oil, and Saudis have a pretty firm grasp on that. And when you throw Russia in the mix and China in the mix, and you start to get a little bit concerned. And you throw countries like Brazil, and yeah, it's interesting to see. So yeah, it's concerning for sure. Whether or not I mean, I guess it's just kind of a matter of time. We'll see how things play out. But right now, it's we better hope we've got a plan to handle these situations, as far as at least developing our own um, independence as far as energy and oil and gas go, because at this rate we've already lost Russia, and the Saudis are quickly to follow. So um, it'll be and there's no denying that we need oil and gas to keep this country running. So what do we do about that to gain our independence and as far as energy goes? Because otherwise we'll be screwed. So it's not only I would say it's probably one of our biggest national security issues at the moment, solidifying where we're gonna. And I would even say as a whole of Europe needs to figure that out too, because at the moment Europe's scrambling. Their gas prices are higher than ever before, and yeah, I mean, it's the US is not the only country suffering. I mean, most of Europe is suffering as well, with inflation and gas prices and all that. So something needs to be figured out quickly. Otherwise it'll be bleak a bleak future ahead of us.
Yeah, you can almost see like the world consolidating into two powers, two major powers between East and West, which almost, I don't know, gives like an apocalyptic feel to it when you hear the prophecies about the world, one world being united under one antichrist, one world ruler. Um, and it feels like we're just kind of setting the stage for that. Just to get into a little conspiracy theory there.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think that it seems very reminiscent of what was going on around the Second World War and what the world saw then. However, I don't think there's a clear. I don't think like, and maybe just because we didn't live through that era, maybe there wasn't a clear way out. But at the very least, you had a country like the U.S. that had the ability to step up and fight back against these powers that be in Europe. And I don't know if I necessarily see that now. Um, I I don't know if you could. I don't know if Europe can rely on us as they did back in the Second World War. And right now, it seems like it's kind of turned tables. The tables have turned a little bit, and we're kind of we might be the U.S. might be the next battleground if there was another world war. I don't think I don't know if it's necessarily going to be fought in Europe. I think it's much more likely that we'd see the battle either come here or the battle be fought over these like proxy wars in Ukraine or in Taiwan.
Yeah, I think with the first two world wars, there were so many intricacies regarding treaties and um, like carried over alliances from the prior century that led to the powers being consolidated. But in today's day and age, it feels like it's more based upon ideology, the consolidation of powers. Russia and China have the communist roots, as well as India with their quasi socialist regime. Um, and then you have the West, who is not much better, focused on democracy, but at the same time trending in the wrong direction. But yeah, it's just interesting to see the different ways in which countries align in values and will work together based upon that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also just the alignment of kind of I would say what I would probably classify as like the dream team of what you need to create a world dominating superpower, right? You've got the natural resources, the infrastructure, and the ability to produce large amounts of technology, whether it's weapons, whether it's whatever it is in China. And then you've just got land mass, manpower, all these things, and they're just kind of forming this world dominating superpower. And I don't know if there's a way to slow that down or stop that or reverse that at all. I think it's just kind of been, at this point, it seems inevitable. It doesn't seem like there's anything there that's going to stop it. But who knows? Tomorrow, we might be in a whole new world. We'll see. Until then, we gotta do our best as Americans to fight for our freedoms and what is right here, and try to set our country on the right path, because I think that's the only hope. I think that's the only way out of this is for America, because I think really they're the only ones that could stand up to something like that. And I think that at the current moment, I don't see ourselves as capable of that because we're so internally divided. So we need to figure out how we're going to right that, and how we're going to get back on the right path and get back on the right track as Americans, and fix our country. And then before we try to go and solve the world's problems, because I don't think currently we're capable of solving the world's problems if we can't fix our own. So I think that's something, it's easy to forget about all the internal issues and look at everything else that's going on in the world and be like, oh, this is a problem, we should fix this and this. And that's something we're really good at too. It's like, oh, we should get involved in this and try to fix this. But at the same time, there's so many issues here that we've neglected and we've failed to address, that need to be addressed in order to make ourselves stronger. And yeah, America needs to return to the. It needs to focus on itself, I think, for a while to kind of set us back in the right direction.
Yeah, I think at one point in time we probably were the ones to come in and solve everything, but yeah, we are definitely way past that point of being able to be the world saver that we once were.
It's like that. It's like that. It's like that blind leading the blind parable in the Bible, and when Jesus talks about removing the splinter from your own eye before you try removing it, or is that right? It's something like that, right? Before you
Yeah,
trying to remove the
yeah,
splinter from the other person's eye, and it makes a lot of sense because if you don't fix your own issues, you're in no position to go out and fix other people's issues or try to fix other people's issues. And I think that's something we've forgotten. So we've become so hyper focused on, and a lot of it has to do with our investment in other things. And politicians, especially politicians and special interest groups, investments in other countries, um, in the military industrial complex, whatever it is. And we become so hyper focused on everything outside of this country when we should be focused on fixing what's actually going wrong here before we go out and try to fix other people's problems.
Yeah, well said, Aiden. I think, yeah, it's like rebuilding the American spirit, and I think like showing everybody the goodness of freedom again. That way we can share with others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're trying to do here. We're just here to try to remind people that America has a lot to offer and that freedom has a lot to offer and that we should all be excited about our freedom and we should all fight for it. And yeah, if you want to check out our parent brand, Lifeline, that whole brand is based around that concept of rebuilding what it means to be American, rebuilding the American identity, helping our fellow patriots. So if you're interested in that, we'll leave a link below. You go check us out. We've got some pretty cool stuff coming. We're not all the way yet, right, Tom? But we're getting closer. So we'll leave that link below. You can sign up for our new weekly newsletter. Um, you put your info in there. That way you get updates as we roll out our latest and greatest updates as far as Lifeline goes.
Yeah.
But moving on to our last world news topic, Russia. Moving on to the other, feel like bad word to say these days. Russia conducted a suicide drone attack on Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, which left 3 dead and numerous people injured. This was pretty interesting. I think Jake's got a little bit to share here, um, so I'll hand it over to him.
yeah. To give some context on these drone strikes, the drones are weighing between 300 and 1,200 pounds, packed full of explosives. So essentially designed to collide with the target and then proliferate the explosion, causing extensive damage. But the US, the Pentagon, has, in response to these strikes, has issued white papers to the anti-aircraft industry, requesting prototypes on uh, anti-aircraft weapons for these missiles and kamikaze drones, as they're called. So basically, they're admitting that we really have no way of defending against these as of right now, which is really, really disturbing. With to realize that China, Russia, whoever else with it will be within their coalition, if they're all going to be exchanging technology, any one of these can send out these drones anywhere and could really, really cause major damage until we wouldn't feel safe until we can find an effective defense against these. So, you know, yeah, it's just something to monitor.
Yeah, I think I you told me that and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's kind of crazy." And even crazier to me is that, we spent all this money sending over all these high-end, weapons defense systems to Ukraine that are essentially now rendered absolutely pointless. So, you know, there's our tax dollars being well spent. Um, yeah, it blows my mind, and you know, I I like to think that the U.S. is pretty advanced when it comes to this stuff, and so to hear from if the Pentagon's out there telling, I mean, that's just crazy that they're out there saying we don't have any defense against this. I think that's kind of, I don't know, that seems kind of like a national security issue right there. Being like, hey guys, just so you know, we don't have any defense against this. That seems like a bit of a problem. I don't know. I don't know. It just doesn't rub me it rubs me the wrong way a little bit.
Yeah, another piece of information I saw today regarding these drones is that the US and Ukraine accused Iran of sharing their technology with Russia to develop these drones, which would, if true, be a breach of a nuclear agreement that was formed in 2015. Russia and Iran consequently denied the accusations, but if that's true that they are sharing technology, it makes you wonder what else are they developing.
Yeah, I mean, if that's true, I mean that has some serious implications there. I mean, that would be yeah, it would not be good. That's for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's strange that they said there's no way to defend against it. I wonder why.
Yeah, from like my point of view, it's just like I don't understand why you'd put that out there.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be a very good strategy in war.
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, I don't know who's running our Pentagon now, but they seem more focused with UFOs than actually taking care of drone strikes.
Hmm. Seems like you could at least I don't know, hack the drone. You know.
I mean, there's got to be something. I don't know. I mean, I'm no expert here, but I feel like there's got to be something you got to be able to do to get these things out of the sky.
That or good old anti-air flak.
Yeah, right?
If
Something.
that was a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
strange.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, but yeah, who knows I mean, how many more of these strikes we'll see now that I mean, it's been proven successful. I think the Russian government came out and said they took out all the targets they wanted to take out. So for them, that's a huge win, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it goes from here, but it's not a good look from our national security from a national security point of view. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guys, that's all I have for world news. So if we want to move on and kind of wrap things up with our main topic, we've got the two final articles of the Bill of Rights, the 9th and the 10th Amendment. Um, I think these first, this being our sixth podcast, these six podcasts have really, at least for me, been extremely helpful in learning more about our rights as American citizens, the rights that have been solidified through uh, these 10 amendments. And so I at least for me, I've learned a lot over the past 6 weeks, and just reading through these, because really I only knew a few of them off the top of my head, and even those I didn't know all that well. So I'm hoping that everybody that's listened to has gotten a little bit out of each week and learned a little bit more about why each of these amendments is extremely important, and hopefully feels a little bit more knowledgeable when somebody asks, "Oh, what's that one?" Because I know I feel a little bit better. I think it'll take time, but it's kind of exciting to be able to see something in the news and be like, "Oh, wow, yeah, that relates to that one, or that relates to that one," or um, I could see how that could apply here or there, and so I think that's been really interesting, at least for me.
Yeah, same here. It's interesting and also exciting to have a deeper dive into the meaning behind each of the amendments, why they were placed, the security they're supposed to give, and then being able to see that through history and our present day of how well they've been implemented and protected, um, and where they've been infringed upon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't we go right into them then, and we'll finish up the Bill of Rights here tonight, and both of these are interesting. I think the ninth stood out to me more than the 10th. And the 10th confused me a little bit, but we talked about it a little bit before the podcast, and I think I've got a better grasp on it now. um, you read some of this wording on these, and they can be a little confusing. And I think, Tom, you made the comment that you feel like you got to be like a law student or studying law to be able to understand some of these, and that back when these were written, they were supposed to be understood by the common man. And I'm gonna put this out there. I feel a little bit stupid. If these were meant for the common man, their IQ must have been like through the roof, or I'm just really dumb, because I I read some of these and I have to like read it like 8 times, and I'm like, I don't know if I get it still. I try my best, but Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, but just the thought that went into each one of these and how well spoken our founding fathers were and how well written they were, um, is really impressive.
It really is. And that they were able to say so much in so few words.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're on here for what, an hour and 20 every week, and we can't even, sum up everything that they said in a sentence.
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, yeah. So I'll go ahead and read the ninth for you guys, and then we can discuss it real quick and and go through it a little bit. So the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be constructed to deny or disparage by the people. Others retained by the people. Sorry, I misspoke there. So, from my bit of research, I found this actually, funny enough, on a blog, uh, or actually a law like study website. But it talked about how the Ninth Amendment was James Madison's attempt to ensure that the Bill of Rights was not seen as granting to the people of the United States only a specific rights that it addressed, um, but also that it affirmed the existence of other unenumerated rights, so outside of the ones expressed by the Bill of Rights. So I thought that was really interesting because it brings up a really interesting point that the Bill of Rights not only contains, I think it contains the rights that the founding fathers saw as the most important, especially in the time that they were writing this, but it also doesn't deny that we as Americans have more rights than are stated in the Bill of Rights. And I think that's really important because, as times change, things, you know, develop and you might have other rights. And so this Ninth Amendment ensures that we as Americans have rights, even if they aren't stated in our Bill of Rights. So I think that's pretty cool, um, to see kind of the foresight there, and to see a bit of humility that the founding fathers realized that they couldn't, or they didn't want to put everything, or they didn't want to state everything, um, in the Bill of Rights as these are the only rights you'll receive. They kind of had this humility to recognize that things might change and people might change. The the ten obviously the 10 original articles were the most important, and those are the ones that we as American citizens are granted and solidified through the Bill of Rights, but also that there's other rights that we as Americans have, and that are still protected, especially because of this Ninth Amendment.
Yeah, because it seems like it would almost be endless to write down all the rights of the people if you had to write out everyone that would be protected by them, protected for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't exclude anything, and I think that's pretty cool. Um, because a lot of times I feel like, especially nowadays when laws are written, it's very specific to a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really leave room for. I feel like this leaves room for a bit of I mean, not. I don't want to say interpretation, but I don't know. I don't know if you guys get what I mean here. But like, it leaves room for there to be things outside of the article stated. Um, And I think that's important when you're talking about we the people's rights, because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself to only the one specified. You want to be able to give the people as much freedom, as much autonomy as possible. So I think that's kind of the importance, at least from where I see it, of the Ninth Amendment, is that it gives the American citizen the autonomy and the freedom and the right in essentially all aspects.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, by the way it's phrased, it shows that the person is still the protect. Well, the person is supposed to be protected by the government. The government's here to serve the person, not the reverse. Um, and so, by saying that there are more rights than just listed in this article, that shows that the person is higher than the government that's supposed to be protecting them.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're exactly right. It puts the it puts the person above the actual institution, the individual rights before the institution of the government, or whatever rights are said to be dictated. I think it gives the person the autonomy to make those decisions rather than the government. So I think that's important. And that kind of leads, I feel like, a little bit into the 10th Amendment to a certain extent, which the 10th Amendment, I think, helps to define the relationship between the federal and state governments, and also kind of, I feel like it's somewhat of a limitation on the federal government. And the 10th Amendment is that it states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. And this is the one I had to like read over like 5 or 6 times before I think I got it. But in like layman's terms, it's essentially just saying that power, it starts out by saying the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. Um, it's essentially giving to the state level, the state government, and back to the people the right to, make decisions, make laws, rather than allowing the federal government to be in control of all that, which kind of sets a check and balance in place to limit the federal government from being this like overarching controlling body. And it kind of separates those powers so there's not one, yeah, one group that's dictating all these laws in place, or and it's not delegating all the power to one particular group, which is extremely important because when you have all the power, typically there's corruption there. And I think that's, at least that's where that's what I took away from this, is that it's a distinction between the federal, the state, and the people, and it's trying to kind of split that power, or set a checks and balances in place to split that power up. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are.
Yeah, it seems like, my understanding of this amendment, that it seems, unless it's been stated what the powers are in the federal government, then anything else outside of what's been stated falls back on the state or people. So you're right, it's like a check, so the federal government can't just keep adding powers to itself, which I think has been, one of the examples of that happening are like the three-letter government agencies, because they're technically speaking not part of the government on the federal level from the beginning. They were added on to become a State Department. Instead of 3 branches of the government, there's 4 now. So it's taking an executive role and just imploding it and making it this overarching thing that then comes down and attacks people, especially in what we've seen with the FBI recently, ATF.
Yeah.
CIA does it. IRS isn't supposed to really be a thing. EPA, all of those ones aren't supposed to be in existence actually, because that's outside of what the Constitution said would be part of the federal government's role.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've got it exactly right there. That I guess the purpose of it is to limit the federal government to what they should be focused on, and then to give everything else back to the state and the people to make the decisions on, what those laws should and shouldn't look like. And I think, Jake, you gave a really good example of this, actually a pretty current event. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, but I liked your take on this because I think you were totally right. It fit perfectly in with the 10th Amendment.
Yeah, the most current example that came to mind when I read the amendment the first time, looking over, preparing for this podcast, was the overturning of Roe v. Wade back in the summer. And the rationale behind it was that the original ruling back in the 70s, which essentially legalized abortion, was that it turned the decision over to the federal government as opposed to the states. And then now, fast forward 50 years later, the ruling was reversed, and the power to make laws regarding how late an abortion can be performed are turned back to the states as they originally were. So that was just something that I guess an encouraging sign to see an overreach by the federal government being overturned and reevaluated to the manner in which the founding fathers originally intended it.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, and I think a lot of people when that decision happened, they were like, well, why? And it's right there. I mean, it's in the 10th Amendment. It states it pretty clearly. Um, but this just goes to show you, I could, if somebody asked me why, I probably couldn't point to the 10th Amendment if they asked me why and say, well, this is why, right? Um, but it's a limitation on what the federal government should and shouldn't be involved in. And that's definitely not one of them. That should be left up to the state and the people to decide, rather than creating a bloated federal government, a federal system, this one overarching kind of body to make the decisions on that. And so yeah, I think exactly, it's really encouraging to see a decision that was made, whether you agree with it or not. But I mean, at the end of the day, the decision didn't say it banned abortion, and I think that's where a lot of people took the, and a lot of that was due to the media, but they took it out of the context of the decision. It didn't say it banned abortion. It just gave the Supreme Court's decision, essentially just gave it back to the state level where it should be at. It shouldn't be a federal issue. The federal government has no business in making laws regarding that. So it just sent it back to the states to be able to make that decision. And that's how it should be, because it takes away, it limits the federal government from getting involved on things they shouldn't.
Yeah, that was that was amusing to me, that narrative that a lot of people were adopting, saying that the Supreme Court was seizing power when in reality it was the opposite. They were turning it back, as you said, to the states, which means to the people who are voting on their representatives, who will in turn vote on these issues. So yeah, it was like you said, you made a good point. The media really really distorted that whole legal proceeding.
Yeah, I think it just stems from a complete lack of understanding how the system was set up to protect the rights of the people. You know, if the government's less, if the federal government is less involved in that lawmaking process, the better it is for the average citizen, because then they have more say in it. But part of the reason most people don't understand that is because I guess most people probably don't care. Like, I mean, they on paper they like to say they care, but in reality, you know, tell them to go out and vote and for what they believe in. We talked about this earlier. If they don't know who they're voting for, they're just voting for a party. So they really don't know who they're electing and what they're representing. So it's just a complete misunderstanding of the system that's in place. And there's a lot of abuse of the system that's in place too that leads to that. But I think if more under I think if more people understood the 10th Amendment, I think a lot more people would get behind it, because it really does give the citizen. I think people complain all the time about how, you know, we have no say in what goes on in the government and the decisions made in the government, blah 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 blah. That's because you've given the federal government so much control in your life that, yeah, of course you don't have say. You have you're you have absolutely no say, actually. As soon as you hand that power, as soon as you hand that decision over to them, you'll never get it back, right? And that's what the 10th Amendment is. It's a limitation on that. And I think, if you know, I think it's one of those that I think most Americans could get behind, because at the end of the day, we just want our ideas, our beliefs represented in, you know, in the House and the Senate, right? And the only way to do that is to fix kind of this broken system that we have in place. So, and through the 10th Amendment, it's given to us right there. We've got to stand up for it. We've got to understand our rights. So, we've got to understand that we have the ability to take back a lot of the decision making that's going on currently by politicians and people in the federal government.
Yeah, definitely. And understanding that we have the power then opens our minds up on how we can apply and use that power in the best way. So then, like, we've seen that a lot, especially with like the federal court system and state districts, and how they can take up a problem that could be somewhere in the country. They can take it up with their own court, decide on it, and if it gets passed in the right way, they can stop an evil. Or if it's a bigger problem, it can then go up to the Supreme Court or back down. Um, but I mean, it seems like we can even bring some of our problems to our representatives. It seems like, I don't know if this works out exactly or not. It seems like there should be a way for us to be speaking more locally with our representatives, so that they can take the issues up in the courts and then solve the problems faster. Is that actually a thing? Like, could we do that as a citizen? Do you guys?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just wondering if that's like a possibility. Like, can we actually present our own case in a federal court if we have a problem for something?
Hmm.
Seems like we would.
I feel like you could, but I actually don't know the answer to that. I'd have to check that out. That might be something worth researching. I bet, but I feel like we should. I feel like that should be something that we'd be able to do.
Yeah,
Huh.
because I know there's like suing, like anyone can sue something.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one way of doing it. Huh. It'd be interesting to understand that more.
Yeah, I know. There's so many intricacies to the legal system. It's like you can get lost in it so quick. It's like you can do this, but you can't do that. But you could do it this way to get around that. You're like, what? And that's why we have lawyers.
Yeah.
And that's why there's not many of them. It's not easy.
Yeah. True.
It's a fascinating profession, and I admire people that go through law school and actually are really good at their job because it's so much to understand and comprehend, and when it comes to the precedent and everything, I mean, it is just, it's like, whoa, it's kind of mind boggling.
It really is. Yeah, and then when you see a good lawyer, you're like, well done. You did a good job.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's truly like impressive when you see a good argument presented. You're like, wow, I don't think I could have come up with that ever, ever. You could put like the highest IQ brain in my head. I probably still wouldn't be able to figure it out. uh, but yeah, I think, yeah, both the 9th and the 10th, they have I shoot, before I looked these up and I did a little bit of research, I had no clue what they were, but I think both of them give a lot of power back to us as citizens, like all of these rights. And I think as always, I think it's a reminder that the government, we don't have to listen. The government doesn't dictate us. We dictate what the government does. The government works for us, and we shouldn't forget that, because I think more and more we just kind of bend over and take whatever the government says, and you know the more we give up, the less and less freedoms we'll have. So we have to recognize that it's extremely important to fight for our freedom, and to be really educated in our freedoms as Americans, because I think that's the biggest thing is most Americans have no idea what their freedoms and rights actually are, and that was the idea behind going over the Bill of Rights, is to help us as well as others understand as Americans what our rights are, uh, and how we can have a better understanding of those rights in order to preserve them, to utilize them to the fullest extent, and to not lose them. So yeah, I'm glad we went over all of them, because hey, I learned a lot. I learned a lot over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
agreed. I think that was very, very enlightening, and absolutely feel a lot more comfortable um, in conversation about amendments, rights. A conversation that comes up so often nowadays.
Yeah, I think you can really impress some people out there. Like get out there and start talking about the 9th and the 10th Amendment. People are like, who are you? Are you in law school? Like, what's your deal? I mean, and just to think these were intended for the average citizen to just know and to understand. And yet here we are in 2022, and I would say probably 99% of the population doesn't know all 10. and definitely doesn't understand what they mean, even if they do know them. So it's it's critical. I mean, it's absolutely critical for us to understand who we are as Americans and the freedoms that we have. It's pretty awesome. It makes you excited to be an American. At least makes me excited to be American. So, especially in the world we live in today.
Absolutely. It's such a blessing.
But yeah, guys, that's all I got on the 9th and 10th. So if you're ready to wrap things up for the day, I guess I can close this out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for making it all the way through this podcast. If you want to check us out on social, we're on Instagram, Green Dragon Podcast. I'll leave the links below. We're also on YouTube. If you want to see the actual video, you can see us talking. You can see our pretty faces. So we'll leave those links below as well. As always, I'll leave all the information from the articles we talked about, the videos we talked about in the show notes on this episode description. Give us a like, give us a follow. If you feel so inclined, leave us a comment. We always appreciate those. And yeah, give us a follow on social as well. So thanks, guys, for another week tuning in. Be safe out there this week. Be a good person, but most importantly, be a good American. God bless you. Have a good night.